and we have to be a little humble before we approach, a very complicated, rich tradition that spans, millennia and culture and context, etc. So that helps me, I think, move forward in good faith because I'm not really looking to win. People want my perspective. Sure, I'll share it with you. And listen, you don't have to agree. That's totally fine.
Hey friends, welcome to the Victor Marks Podcast with Victor Marks, founder of All Things Possible Ministries. Welcome to the show where we bring you real conversations faced with life's hard truths, stories of redemption, and the latest from the front lines. Whether you're on the road, getting your day started, or finally settling in, we've got an exciting new episode planned for you. So let's dive into today's show.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Victor Marks Show. I always say I have a special guest because they're all special, but this, I will say, is going to be the first show I've done with a full-on antagonist dude that I met online that I hope we can square him away, people. He is, I've called him a whiner. I just need help with this dude. He is Tim Whitaker, a force to be reckoned with. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to keep you off balance for as long as I can because I'm pretty acutely aware your IQ is higher than mine. So
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
My father had an IQ of 185. And
wow.
He was tested twice at Stanford. He was actually a genius. But when it came time for me, I think I was on the different end, the shallow end of the gene pool for that. But, okay, so today, folks, I will say this. Tim is, I would consider, a young man who's evangelical, who started and helped pioneer a movement called the New Evangelical Babies. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We are the New Evangelical Babies, and we whine a lot. That's what we do.
So outwardly, if you would see this guy's post, most of you who subscribe and follow this channel or to my show, which is on pray.com, we just crossed 200,000 subscribers just on that venue, and we have the others. So I appreciate y'all. But if you were to look at his Instagram page, which is, what is it?
The New Evangelicals.
Ugh, I cringe giving it out, but I have to, people. I'm fair and balanced. You will see stuff that just makes you go, oh my gosh, really? And yet I watched enough of them to where I said, don't agree with them on a lot. But you're articulate, you're thoughtful. I think you're intellectually honest, which matters to me. Even if someone's wrong, right? Which I've been wrong plenty of times. And you like civil discourse. So, folks, that's why I want to have Mr. Tim Whitaker on the program. So, welcome. Again.
I appreciate that. And for the record, I sincerely do try to be as intellectually honest as possible, even though we all have our biases, and I do have mine, of course. We're all human. And I will say that, like you, I really am always down for good faith dialogue. I've talked to many folks on my own podcast who don't agree with me, and we have civil engagement. I think that's very important going forward. So I appreciate you having me on the show. It means a lot that you would, take a chance on me. So thanks.
You're welcome. I'm thrilled to. I talked to a number of people who I said, hey, why don't you debate this guy? He's, he's pretty heady, knows what he believes. And I have to admit, I had a few pastors go, no way. Don't mess with that guy. He's a waste of time. And I was like, okay, do you really mean that? Or are you afraid of this dude for civil? Are you just so agitated with them? And sometimes we just are, right? We're like, I don't have time for that.
Sure. Yeah.
But, again, I think this is going to be good. So, folks, please stick around. This is going to be fun. I am going to find out. The first thing I want to do with our guest is find out if he's triggered. Because he's what are you? Are you a Gen Z or P?
I am
or
30.
What is
I'm 34, so I'm a millennial.
Millennial.
I have two kids under 2, so I'm kind of in like the middle of the millennial pack,
Okay.
age-wise. Yeah.
Okay. So I got to find out if you're triggered by things. Let's get this started.
Let's go. I'm ready.
Does this trigger you?
It does immensely. How could you show me that without giving me a trigger warning, Victor?
Okay, I did give you a trigger warning. See, be honest. It's on film. Does this trigger you? Oh, wait. Here we go. It's a little bit more aggressive.
Oh, is that a Leonidas hat, though?
It is?
I'm part Greek, and I'm a big fan of 300, so this does not trigger me that much. I'm a Leonidas fan. I'm being honest.
I want to give you a hug right now. I just want to give you a hug and a safe space. All right.
Thank you.
How about this?
Oh boy.
My staff doesn't even know I'm doing this. So, folks, please. Does Kit make you nervous?
Is that a bulletproof vest?
Yeah, we call it. Body armor.
Yeah, I'm nervous for you, not for me. You're the one wearing it. Is someone trying to attack you? Are you under threat?
Oh,
Blink
brother.
twice, Victor, if you're okay. Blink twice.
Yeah. It's actually got mags and bullets. These are called bulletes in your world. And
I grew up around guns, so that does not trigger me.
Damn you, Tim. I'm pulling out my best.
I'm sorry. Wait, am I supposed to end this conversation and say, "Oh my God, I'm so triggered"? End the conversation so you can do this for clickbait. Is that how this is supposed to work?
Yeah, or crawl into a fetal position and suck your thumb or something.
My bad. I'm so sorry.
Well, then I'm not even going to show you my pump shotgun because that might just motivate you. Forget it. Okay,
Yep.
So folks, we're cutting through some of the stereotypes, and the last thing I was going to see if triggered you is this: a Bible. Does a Bible trigger you?
I don't think so, Victor. I got one right here.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So we are starting to understand what we agree on, and before we discuss maybe what we don't,
Sure.
and so on a biblical basis, still, do you believe Jesus is the only way to heaven?
So here's the problem with that question for me. I'm being honest. That statement is too loaded. It depends on what part of the Christian tradition you ask. You know, I mean, N.T. Wright or many other theologians would not argue that the goal is heaven, that the goal is a renewed creation. That's not liberal. That's Christian thinking. So I am always, it comes across coy. I'm not trying to be, but I do take my faith seriously, and I'm personally convinced that the goal long term is a renewed creation where God dwells among his creation, and we co-rule together. I'm really drawing from an organization called the Bible Project. That's who I really get a lot of my theology from these days. They're really pretty consistent, really beautiful, deep Bible nerds. So I would say that ultimately all things are reconciled through Christ. Ultimately, at the end of the day, and that we have a renewed world, long term. Now, I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime, but I think as a Jesus follower, I have an obligation to represent Jesus on earth and to do my part to bring heaven to earth.
I see what you did just there, Tim. Okay, I'm up on all your fancy college theological language.
I didn't even go to college, Victor.
Bring it down.
2 years.
Bring it down, okay? I told you to be nice to me on my own show.
I'm sorry.
All right, so folks, another thing, as many of you know, I'm not here. This is not a debate. This is for me, this is a reconnaissance mission to find out what Tim believes so that my audience of hundreds of thousands of people can better understand a strong following. And, well, let me ask you, how many people do you think fall in your camp of the new evangelical, or, they feel burnt by they have heartburn or, heartburn? How many people do you think are out there in your age group?
I mean, David Gushee, who's a theologian on this, he estimates between 5 to 15 million people who are, well, what we might say in a more general term, are disenfranchised with the current state of evangelical church. There's a lot of reasons why that happens. And some people take the exit ramp out of the Christian tradition completely, and others say, actually, I just want to leave the basement of evangelicalism and explore the house of Christian thinking. I land more in that latter camp of I'm still committed to Jesus. In fact, I would argue my commitment to Jesus led me out of where I grew up and how I was raised to find Jesus in a more holistic and healthy way. Still firmly committed to the resurrection of Jesus. I'm still committed to all the orthodox beliefs that the Nicene Creed would say. Committed to all those things. But as far as my own tradition, I would say I'm pretty out of that room, so to speak, and I've walked into other spaces that I just find more compelling.
You're making this more and more difficult for me to call you backslidden prodigal that needs to repent. All right, let's continue.
Okay.
So I've got a lot of people listening right now that's going, did he just say something about the evangelicals? God bless America.
Sure.
Punch him in his face, Victor. Punch him right in his nose.
Sure.
So here's what I believe, and this is where we agree. There's a lot of nonsense. There has been in the evangelical world. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say the machine of ministry. I'll say pastors becoming the princes of their church. No accountability, because a board doesn't mean you're accountable. It means you've stacked it with guys that won't agree. My hot topic and where I'm passionate is children or people being abused within the church. Mm-hmm. And it's been an untouchable organization or how in approach to ministry that almost became incestuous within its ranks, different sects, but one major deal that you don't tell, you don't talk, and then they back it up with scripture of don't cause dissension, don't. So this is where me and you, I was like, oh gosh, we're on the same page. We may come to different ends of approaches, and that's okay, because one day you'll learn how right I am. So, but do you agree with all that so far?
1,000%.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, even before I quote unquote, left that space, although I would argue I was kind of forced out, but that's for a different discussion. Even back in the day when I was 18 and 20 and fully committed to those spaces, I had the same critiques as you, that it's, this, I believe that ultimately, and I'm speaking with a broad brush, there's always exceptions to every rule. We all understand that. But, the evangelical culture, the megachurch culture that a lot of us maybe have been a part of at some point in our life is more event-centered than community-centered. And they're more focused on the numerical growth. And usually what happens a lot of times is one or two people become the face of the organization. And then when there's problems or there's legitimate abuse, as you and I both know about, those people are usually protected at the expense of the victims. And to me, that is what I would call, and I don't mean this in the provocative sense, just in the literal sense, I see it as an antichrist perspective. It's not the way of Christ. It's anti the approach that Christ would have. So I think a lot of people, including victims that I work with consistently in my spaces, have these stories of like, I gave everything, I was devoted, this happened to me, and I was given Bible verses. I'm causing division. There was no accountability. That leader is still in authority today. And so, yes, I completely agree with you.
So do you think that in your world, in your space, as you say, there are many people that, they're just hurt. They're hurt from spiritual abuse. They're hurt from some of the realities. That's what motivates them to where they don't want to fall from faith, but they want to come at it differently. Would you say that's fair?
I would say that in my experience, which is just experience, this is still a newly kind of forming thing that we're all trying to make sense of, this deconstruction term that we hear all about. But I would say, in my opinion, the people that I'm working with are having a crisis of theology, not a crisis of faith. Right. So they're not thinking if God does or doesn't exist, or they're not thinking about if Jesus was real or not. They already believe that. But what they were taught about what it means to be a Christian, what the primary focuses were, how this Jesus person influences us to live as Christians, that is what they're having the crisis of theology about. How do we understand God in the Christian tradition? That, I would say, is the crux. And there's a lot of ways, a lot of paths, so to speak, to get there, to that point. But that, I think, is the crux for many of the people that I work with.
Okay. And I would say the way that it's communicated is I hear a lot of pain in at least the tone. Like almost that's some of the fuel. It's pain. It's hurt. And I've learned don't delegitimize or don't push back someone's argument because it's coming out of a place of pain. Try to hear what they're saying. Or I've told people before, you're yelling so loud, I really can't hear you.
Right.
And that's why I said, let's get together and talk about this to help people understand where y'all are coming from, because your generation or this community, which we know are millions, are going to affect the future of the church. And I think there's great potential if, both sides kind of come to a middle place of understanding and realize maybe some of the positions on the friends that we don't agree on, it's okay. Let's put it in the category of carpet versus wood floors.
Yeah.
Traditional worship versus guitars.
Right.
But there's still a lost, hurting world that needs Jesus.
Yes. I agree with a lot of that. I think it's important for maybe your audience to know that, if they go to my Instagram page or our Instagram page or our website or listen to our podcast, whatever, they have to keep in mind that we're not critiquing the capital C church, because the church is massive. You have the Eastern Orthodox, right. You have the Catholics, the Baptists, the Protestants. We're critiquing the systems that we in 2022 America have mapped on to how the church organizes. So we have to think a level deeper than just, they don't like the church. No. I love the church so much that I started a nonprofit organization called the New Evangelicals, trying to find better paths forward as Jesus people. What I don't love are these megachurch and these corporate systems we've mapped onto how the church gathers that is causing a lot of pain. And more importantly, and I think this is the crux, because people think often, well, you just want perfection. No, we would like accountability. We would like people just to take ownership and say, you know what, that was really wrong, and we have to fix whatever caused that to happen. And oftentimes in my space, what we see are leaders who have been, it's been documented, their abuse, and they're still teaching. Or another pastor brings them on stage and say, we have to give them grace. And listen, I'm all about grace, okay? But I used to work at a major tech company. And if I abuse some of the workers, some of the way these pastors abuse their parishioners, doesn't matter how much I would say I'm sorry, they would still fire me, because there's still a consequence of you forfeited that position. You can still exist, you can function in society, we're not going to throw you in prison, but maybe we shouldn't give you the keys to a massive megachurch given your history. And for some people, it just seems like that's too much to ask. I think it's very reasonable.
Yeah, to me, it's interesting that you use that, comparison, because there's so many professions that, if you mess up, you're going to be shown the door. And it isn't this cheap grace of, and it doesn't seem, it seems like right now, it takes a whole lot to get a pastor or leader, we'll just say pastor, held accountable for decisions. And then typically it's too late. And then everybody turns on them at that point. And I'm like, well, yeah, he's caught and he's going to face very severe consequences. Isn't this a time where y'all should kind of be still loving the dude because he's going to face prison or whatever. So that's the weirdness. And you said you started this organization. It is a nonprofit. When will you sell prayer cloths?
Yeah, that's actually in development right now.
Good.
It'll be $19.99. So we're going to undercut Joel Osteen on the prayer cloth game to hopefully sell a little bit more than he does. So yeah, we're working on that.
I want
100%.
to.
I'll give you a buy one get one. I'll give you a good deal.
And sign it for me if you.
Done.
Yeah, I actually ordered one time.
No, you did
I've got 5 kids. No, listen to me. I ordered super prayer healing oil. Listen, don't judge me yet. Don't judge me yet.
Okay.
Your kids are young. I had 3 teenagers in my house at the same time and a wife who was going through menopause, and I just said, none of this is fair. One of my teenagers was just holy smokes. And I remember going, okay, I was so desperate. We tried everything. And one night late, I was watching some TV show, and they said, order this oil for rebellious children. Put it in their laundry, on their pillow. It will work. I was so desperate, Tim. And it was free. Okay, it was free. First one's free. Don't you worry. So I ordered it. Wow. I poured it in the laundry on their pillow. I was like, I think I put some in their cereal. And I was like, Lord, do something with this kid. This kid drive me crazy. Nothing happened. Nothing happened except I got on those folks' mailing list, and sure enough, it was a highlighted yellow and write a check. You know what I did? I after about the third one, I took a big magic marker and said, it didn't work, you bunch of fakes, and sent it back.
Can I add one thing to what you said earlier, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
I want to be clear about something too. What I'm not saying is that if a pastor does something bad, like says a curse word, or or is short with someone, they should be fired. We're talking about people who hire pedophiles on their staff and cover it up, and then when reports come out about it, don't respond to it and keep going like nothing ever happened. The big difference between that. So again, I just want to be clear to your audience because they might not know me. I'm not saying if you make a mistake, you should be fired. I'm just saying it has to be appropriate. And if I wouldn't trust my kids in your nursery because of who you hire on your staff, I don't think you should be in leadership over a massive church organization. Again, to me, that's just pretty common. It's common sense in my view. Yeah.
And this is where we agree. These are the big major things we agree on, where like currently there's in the news, The Rock Church in San Diego, Miles McPherson, an elder who was ordained. And long story short, her husband worked for Border Patrol. Parents were involved. They had adopted 2 kids. I think it was 2 or 3 siblings. Anyway, one of them died from malnutrition and beating and abuse. And, of course, there's sexual stuff. And, somebody just today commented on my post and said, they were trying to soften the whole deal by going, look, it's a mega church. You can't micromanage everybody. Why are you trying to hold them accountable? And I said, well, first of all, can we just first admit the Christian church in general doesn't have a gift of discernment operating much? If people really believe that's supposed to be a gift in the evangelical world, like common sense discernment. And second, this woman was ordained and an elder. And there were so many signs. Tell me that's not a part of leadership. And I think they had responded, that the actual church, and said, we just took her down off our website and she's no longer ordained. We revoked ordination. I'm just like, but it's just what you said. There's such a covering. Ravi Zacharias. I knew Ravi. We spoke at events together.
Wow.
A brilliant intellect and a great communicator as an apologetist. And yet we were one of the first ones to say, folks, do not start pushing back on this. Facts are coming out. Just consider the facts. And, man, we got hammered. We would probably get as hammered as equally as you of attacking someone. And I'm like, it's me, folks. I am the evangelical dude.
Right.
This is my tribe.
Right.
But he is a predator. If we put him into a camp of a sexual predator using his position of authority for spiritual abuse, it's him. And it wasn't until way later that everybody's like, oh, gosh, I guess you were right. So what you and I are saying, and we agree on, let's just start with the children. And I mean, just let's protect our children that go to churches, because I know so many, and I'm sure you do too, they'll fill your ranks of young people that were compromised or abused under some type of evangelical church, leadership function event.
Yeah.
And they're still hurting. They're still in pain.
Yes. Yes.
Because abuse lasts a lifetime if you don't get healed, and especially if it's not, reconciled or acknowledged. So, I think it's time. And you tell me, because I want to see if you agree with this. Because people say, well, Victor, you're exposing a lot, you and your guys' teams. I mean, we just did a sting operation with Homeland Security in Kansas City, a 4-state office special agent. And this is our organization. We're different. We're Christian. We're ministry in the U.S. We're NGOs overseas. But we hunt bad guys. And I remember the special agent in charge. We have a task force. He just goes, we couldn't be doing what we're doing right now without y'all's help. And we got a lot of super nerds on our teams. Everybody thinks we're all knuckle draggers, and I'm like, if you knew some of the, analysts we have that are hunting. So, but they did a sting operation, and they informed us about a pastor that drove the church van to a hotel to have sex with a 14-year-old girl. And he parked the van right in front of the hotel. Of course, he got busted. But it's like, guys, do we have to wait that long? So people ask me, what can we do, Victor? And this is my best advice. And I'm going to interview an organization that does investigations for churches and organizations. But this is what I'm telling churches right now. And it's going to be sad and damning what I tell you as a result of it by one organization. But they said, this is what I'm telling people. You need to, and I'll say this for any churches, you need to put in a polygraph exam for anyone that's going to work with children. One is a deterrent, because if you've got a pedophile that's never been caught, or someone that has minor attraction to kids or youth, they will not apply for a position, even as a volunteer, because they know, I'm subject to a polygraph. Yeah, there's very specific questions that'll be asked to find out if you have struggles and if you have, The second thing, because that if you do a background check, Tim, they do background checks all the time. That doesn't determine or expose if someone who's never been caught but is looking at child porn at home. And then they find the softest target, which is a church, and they want to work with minors or kids. So that's a reasonable, it's a cost, but what a way to protect children. I talked to an organization that, we belong to a tribe, and for years, it's the Calvary Chapels. And I've got lots of friends and brothers in the Calvaries, and a lot of them are doing it right. But I was told, Victor, as an organization, either side of the Calvary, because it got split, they will probably never institute that as governing organizations because, and this was a senior guy's words, there's too much dirt on a number of senior pastors. And I'm like, okay, so you know what? I'd even be willing to say, well, if you know where the bodies are hidden, I don't care. But at least have the courage to say, moving forward, we'll institute this for anybody that's working with children. Okay, the senior pastor committed adultery. Senior pastor, I don't care. That's a different deal. Let's just focus on kids. We are required by God to protect children. So I don't know if those organizations will ever do it, or Southern Baptist Convention, or anybody, but I'll tell you, it's a reasonable, and this is the pushback I get, Tim. It's like, well, Victor, you can cheat those, and you can. I go, great. You pay for it. I'll put you under one. Let's see if you can cheat it.
Yep. I mean,
well, there are people who know how. I go, there's an 80-something% efficiency rate. Police detectives wouldn't use it, I'm sorry, the intelligence community to get a certain clearance. We wouldn't be using it in that realm. There's a place for it. So what say you? Is that reasonable? Would that be reasonable?
Listen, that's the first time I've ever thought of that based on what you presented to me. Off the top of my head, it sounds very reasonable. I think that, and I want to preface that I grew up. I was homeschooled for 9 years.
Tell us about your background. I really want people to know.
Okay, yeah, just so you all know, like where I come from. I grew up in a very loving family. I have great parents. They were wonderful people. They got saved when they were 18, and they got saved into more like conservative, fundamentalist spaces. Think like John MacArthur type of theology, etc. And that's how I grew up. Homeschooled, but I was always committed to being a Christian. I mean, from day one to now, committed Jesus follower all the way through. So I say that because I grew up in these spaces. I understand these spaces. My dad was a blue-collar worker, taught me the ethic of hard work. I would go on field trips, which was working with him on the job site, listening to Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. I mean, that's just the world I inhabited and I grew up in. And I say that because I think sometimes people see, or like the work that we do, or they hear me say deconstruction. They think that I'm just, some person who has no clue what I'm talking about. But really, I was deeply embedded in these spaces. I also listened to Ravi Zacharias every time the podcast episode dropped. I mean, I was reading Lee Strobel books. I was reading Paul Washer's sermons and listening to them and reading this book. I mean, I was all in. I have found that in my experience, I think that one of the core issues to why you're never going to see polygraphs instituted in the evangelical church widely is because and I mean this sincerely, I don't think that evangelicalism has the ability to self-reflect and really take ownership when they drop the ball big time. It takes a lot. I mean, look at the SBC. It took almost a decade for them to finally admit that, yes, actually, we've known about this for a long time and have just kind of covered it up. And that was only because of public pressure and survivors coming forward. And then I think about, too, like for me, I think what was confusing was growing up in spaces that hammered repentance and asking God for forgiveness and admitting that I'm wrong and turning and going away from my sin, and that leaders are held to a higher standard. And if I was going to volunteer as the drummer on the worship team, I had to live a life of integrity. And then you have these pastors in these positions that clearly don't do that, and then people say, well, they're not perfect. It's like, what? Like these standards don't add up for me. Not to mention, we could speak it in very blunt terms. The Bible, in this case, I think Paul's pretty darn clear in 1 Corinthians 5. He spells out the whole case that people are called to hold the church accountable, not the world accountable. You can read it for yourself. He has this whole story, right? A man who's sleeping, I think, with his mother-in-law, and the church celebrates it. And he says, hand this man over to Satan, which is really a way of saying, in an honor-shame culture, it's a way of saying shame him to repentance. That's how the culture operated back then. And he says, I did not tell you not to associate with anyone who's sexually immoral, because if that was the standard, you couldn't associate with anyone, because the world has their problems. But judge those in the church and cast those outside of the church who do that. And so it's very clear, in my opinion, and I think personally that the evangelical tradition I grew up in has it inverted. They have a megaphone screaming at the world for all of what they think is perverse or sexually immoral. Meanwhile, inside, they really allow leaders to get away with sometimes legitimate murder, if not the abuse of children. And to me, I just said, I'm sorry. My love for Jesus, I take his word seriously. There's a problem here. There's no sense of repentance or wanting to change. I have to find better ways of being Christian going forward.
Well, this is good, and I hope people hear your heart and understand. Because you can't dismiss Tim's position because of where he's come from. And he's not, I wouldn't put him into the easy camp of, well, in the last days, people would fall from the, folks, yeah. You can't do that with Tim. He's a dangerous man. Again, we won't be able to discuss the things we don't agree on on this podcast, on this show, but we will, like why you voted for Biden. So the other things.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, not today. Stop it.
We
Knock
can't?
it off.
Oh,
no.
Okay. All right, fine.
I've got some. But that's when, folks, I'm going to get in someone else so we can just really, the three of us, I'll moderate, strong differing positions when it comes to politics, when it comes time for civic leadership, because I think that's where people are befuddled by how some of the younger generation doesn't take a stand on issues that matter to us, just like they matter to your generation, but it is so worth talking about, not yelling at each other about, but talking about. And I'll be the first to admit, Tim, on like obviously, I'm friends with, I think that's one of the things that triggered you. Literally, you're like, you're friends with Charlie Kirk? I go, yeah. Turning point, oh my gosh. But yet, to your credit, you had a good conversation with one of the leaders to help understand more their positions. Because don't you think we just, lazy people come intellectually, are fearful people, they come at things from an opposite, and they're not willing to discuss or find out the truth. They just want to hammer, and it's easy, especially on social media, where we're just chunking grenades. And some do it for clickbait, some do it for, other reasons. But I think people listening to you and understanding your background and what we believe on will really be interested to hear a good, honest, positional debate on different issues.
Well, I think the key on my end, just to be transparent with you, and I'm not going to go into any of those weeds that you mentioned, but, I don't really debate. Like, that's just not how I operate. You can even listen, like I said, to our podcast. We've had folks who we don't agree with. We talk. And the reason why I say that is, there's a reason why I say that. I have found that in a media-driven world, it sounds like there are certain people who are just looking to win the conversation. They want that slam dunk talking point that just is like, yeah, my side just really got one over on that guy. And I don't think that is honest, right? I don't think that is an honest discussion. And so even like you mentioned, Charlie Kirk, yes, the reason why I personally have a hard time with that person is because I don't know if I would trust him to have a good discussion with me, because I know he has a base he has to cater to. I don't have that problem because I'm a little tadpole
piranha.
In the pond,
You're a piranha.
Yeah.
You're a piranha, brother.
Oh yeah, that's me, the piranha.
I ain't saying tadpole. Better be careful sticking your hand in that water with Tim. Well, and I agree with you. The talking, that's all I do. That probably was not a good term, debate, but conversations matter. And, from my perspective, we have a mutual, do you know, Ruslan? Is it?
Oh, yeah. I know him.
Right.
Yeah, we chat.
Okay, so, how we met is he wrote something on my page, and I was actually being bombarded by some Russian stuff, and because we're international, and I thought he was, I literally thought he was some Russian who was just, so I was like, hey man, slow your roll, and he kept hammering, so I deleted him. I was like, there's no room for this.
That's funny.
The next thing you know, I get a video from somebody that says, do you know this guy? He's a podcaster out of San Diego. He just called you a coward. He made a video and called you a coward. I said, really? No. And then I put it all together. I watched the video, and I laughed my head off. But like you, I went, whoa, this is a younger guy. I started watching some of his stuff. I went, that's a younger guy he's being intellectually honest. I think he's misguided on some things. But wow. He could be a force to be reckoned with. So guess what? I contacted him. And I said, hey, I'm the guy you called a coward. Watch this video and then let me know if you still feel that way. Because I think you made an uninformed decision But if you watch the video and then you say, you are a coward, you're just this old geezer, I said, you'll have no rebuttal from me. And he watched it. To his credit, he made a quick video, put it up on his channel, and said, well, I did not know this guy and I thought, see, I knew that was in him. And we became friends. And he goes, you know what? Tension I've had with people don't call me. People don't call. And I go,
right.
Yeah, that they're missing an opportunity. Now, if it's a person that you think you're going to get nowhere with, then you don't waste the time.
Sure.
But
I mean, that's a lot of my conversations. And frankly, you're right. Listen, I've had to admit before that I'm wrong because I'm human. In fact, one time I made a reel calling out a megachurch pastor, and he messaged me saying, hey, I think you really misinterpreted the clip. I said, well, if you'll talk to me, I'll take it down. He goes, deal. So we talked, and we actually keep in touch to this day via text message.
Yeah,
and
I think that's so cool.
I have found that, that's what gives me hope, is people who are able to say, listen, like, I'm not claiming to have the lockdown on some new truth that somehow no one else has but me. The world is bigger than any one of us, and so is the Christian tradition, by the way, way bigger. And we have to be a little humble before we approach, a very complicated, rich tradition that spans millennia and culture and context, etc. So that helps me, I think, move forward in good faith, because I'm not really looking to win. People want my perspective. Sure, I'll share it with you. And listen, you don't have to agree. That's totally fine. We can move on and shake hands, but there's no reason to dehumanize the other, because I think ultimately dehumanization of the other is what leads to violence, and I think that participates in the cycle of chaos that God is trying to get out of his good earth. So I want to participate in cycles of order and of goodness. And I think dehumanization is the beginning to repeating the cycles that we're all trying to stop, but inadvertently sometimes we actually are part of that cycle as well.
Yeah, I love that. I'll just say this before we close, because I have a couple of questions I ask all my guests, but I got really humbled in two places. And I won't give the whole story, but the first one was in a mosque. Where I was brought into a mosque in Iraq under the most extreme situations. And I'll never forget the Holy Spirit, which I believe in. Do you believe in the Holy Spirit? Can we say that?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Spoke to my heart, just prompted me and said, look at these men. You thought they're all here because of duty? There are some here because of just devotion, and they're weeping. They've washed their hands and feet before they approach me, because this is the only way they know how. Great conviction, because I went in there thinking, if only you guys knew what I knew. And then the second place was at the birthplace of Jesus Christ in Bethlehem, where the Orthodox and that whole deal. And the two things I took away from that was, oh my gosh, we evangelicals are arrogant. We are not even, junior hires in this game.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
And then the second part was how, the traditions of church still hate each other so greatly they can't even cross the floor. They have different entries to see the birthplace of Jesus. I thought, wow, okay, well, you guys are messed up. So it's a good conversation that matters, and I appreciate you coming on, because one, it takes courage, and I know that sounds like, for somebody like you, like, what? No, that it does. There's a lot of people that would not, I think because I just exude testosterone and masculinity.
That's definitely it. Yeah, definitely.
Is that
it's the bulletproof vest that really gives it away from me.
Yeah, could you pull up the cover of your tattoo, because you ruined my whole image.
My bad.
If you're listening, you got to see the video of this. He ruined all my guys got more ink than me. Okay, two questions. The first one is based on perception. Most people make decisions based on your perception. You don't, unless you did some type of in-depth research, you really don't know a lot. But I ask all my guests, what is your perception of me and what I do in our organization?
Yeah, you're a hard one for me to pin down. I don't really know a ton about you besides what we've talked about, but based on what you said, it looks like you are someone, you run an organization that is built on protecting the most vulnerable among us. That's my best guess. And I think you're actually intellectually honest, even if you have some convictions that I wouldn't find, convincing. But I think that you got there because you thought through them, not because you believe talking points or dogma. So you seem like you're someone who engages good faith dialogue and is willing to coexist with folks who might not see it the same way without calling them a demon or something like that, which I really appreciate.
Well, not on my first podcast with them.
Yeah, you gotta reel me in real slow, right?
Yeah,
I'm
by
safe.
the third
I'm good.
Yeah, by the third one, you'll be repentive and
you're gonna drop Charlie
donating to our
Kirk in
ministry.
all of a sudden. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Why is Charlie Kirk here?
Yeah, I'm gonna have you wearing a MAGA hat. Where I unintentionally but could care less offend some people is there's a group called Gays Against Groomers.
Oh, I know who they are.
Yeah, so when they first started up, I promoted them on my platforms, and you don't do that as a super conservative evangelical. It's just, you don't do that because they're gay. Right. God bless America, gay people. Right. They're and one of the fellas, I'm like, dude, you're queerer than a $3 bill, but you're honest and you care about kids. And quite honestly, most of you guys are doing more than pastors that I know. I hold nothing but respect. And even though we don't agree in this area, I ain't dehumanizing y'all because I've learned to fight an enemy of my, so-called enemy and physically in real life combat. I remember, we were trying to rescue some women and children. This was just a few years ago. And I stood alongside the Hasta Shabi. I've stood along, which is an Iranian backed. I've stood next to the Peshmerga. I've stood next to Iraqi soldiers in order to defeat ISIS, a very evil entity who were killing women and children, raping, sex, all that. So I thought, man, may this be a lesson for people. And I never forget Evan, who's one of the lead guys. Evan just goes, Victor, we can disagree about all the things, da-da-da. He goes, but as long as you don't hurt me or someone else, there's no reason why we can't do work together. And I was like, that's so simple. But yet that's what some people like in the extreme position by downing people who don't agree with them. Anyway, I love those guys and gals, and I appreciate what they do, again, to the cause of helping. And again, allies, and we can work together for a greater good. Disagree on a bunch of stuff and go, well, yeah, that's just like Muslim friends. I had a Muslim guy. We never argued all of our time together. And then one night over dinner, we started talking about the cross, talked about Jesus. And he started getting offended and angry at the cross. And I said, I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to argue, but you know my position and belief in Christ. And then he was so aggravated, and he hates the Jews, right? The Jews, he goes, but the Jews did kill Jesus. And I went, you got me there. You got me there. You're right. They did. And we laughed. We had to laugh at it. So last question. I have 2 minutes left. For Tim, a dad, a husband, a guy leading an organization, really a ministry, we're all going to die. What happens to Tim when you close your eyes for the last time, and why do you believe it?
I don't know. I have hunches maybe. I just to be transparent with your audience, I no longer believe in eternal conscious torment. I don't think that's a thing. I think either a redemption of all things where we live in harmony with each other and with our Creator, or I cease to exist. I think those are one of my two options.
Thank you. You wouldn't know this, but I interview people all the time from all walks of life. And you know what? I hear everything, and I never correct anyone because it's what they believe, right? and it's not fair for me to. I've had some really well-known guests. I remember one guy near superhero status. When I asked him that question, he goes, "Well, I was watching an eagle the other day, and I thought, I think I'm going to come back as an eagle." He goes, "That sounds peaceful." And I said, "Man, thanks for sharing." So, again, some in my world are like, "Give them the gospel, hammer them." I'm like, no. I've learned traveling the world, the Holy Spirit's a whole lot bigger than me.
Yes.
And it's like you said, I have positions and when I believe in convictions.
Sure.
But my gosh, God's a gentle God. And I've said things that could have got me killed. And I said them because I felt like I was supposed to. But it's all based out of love. And that's what I think the church in America needs to go back to on many areas. And sometimes love is harsh when holding people accountable. And that's how we started the whole deal, because I don't believe in, a sloppy agape, because they want to apply that. And I go, it doesn't work when somebody's raping a child, which I know about. Because I was abused and left for dead as a kid in a commercial cooler. I had 123 visits to a trauma specialist. My mother married 6 times. My father was a drug dealer and a pimp. And I believe that riddle that Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put them together again, but the king did. He put me back together. And I'm living proof that God can unscramble eggs. And that's what I'm passionate about. And I tell people that's why sometimes people may take offense at my aggressive, protective nature, but I've lived it. I know what it's like to be shot at, mortared, in order to recover or rescue kids and stand against the face of evil. And I'll close with this for everyone. I had what I call a super apostle ask me one time, "Well, Victor, all the time you spend overseas," because we still have a home in Iraq, they asked me, Are you preaching the gospel to all the Muslims?" And I simply responded by saying, "My friend, I've been reduced to living it." Folks, thank you for joining us on this edition with my special guest, Tim Whitaker. You can find him on Instagram. Tim, what's your website if people want to find your heresy?
Yes. If you want to become a heretic like me, thenewevangelicals.com. Anywhere that the New Evangelicals is, anywhere is pretty much us at this point. So that's us.
Good for y'all. And, hey, I do appreciate the way you've changed some of your messaging. You know, if you were an enemy, I wouldn't tell you because it's actually becoming more effective.
I'm always trying new things, you know.
It's working. Folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, do it for the glory of God and do it full throttle. I think that brings him glory and satisfaction for your soul. God bless you guys. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. We'd love to stay connected with you and invite you to the conversation beyond this podcast. You can check out more of the work we're doing around the world at victormarks.com, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all linked in the show notes. Be sure to drop us a comment in the review section if today's show has impacted you in any way, or if there's anything you'd like to hear more of. We're always encouraged to hear from you. Thanks for spending your time with us. Until next time.